everyone, my name is Dr. Iti Vyas. Today we will discuss about demand theory, a very important topic in microeconomics. In today's session, we will discuss about meaning of demand, determinants of demand, movement in the demand curve, elasticity of demand, law of demand, and how to measure the elasticity of demand. So what is demand? Willingness to purchase, need, and purchasing power. These are the three main elements of demand. Willingness only cannot define the demand. If person's willingness is there that he wants to purchase a certain good, we cannot say that this is his demand. Likewise, need, we cannot say that it is his demand. So to complete the demand, we need to have these three elements: willingness, need, and purchasing power. Purchasing power means ability to pay for that a particular good. So in that sense, we can define demand as the quantity of the commodity which the consumers are willing to buy at a particular time and at a certain price. Suppose, for example, tomatoes price. In recent time, the prices of tomatoes are rupees 150. Now, willingness is there, want is there. Consumers want to purchase tomatoes, but their ability to pay does not allow them to purchase that. So, we cannot say that the demand for tomatoes are there. So, in that way, demand is related to willingness, want, and purchasing power. Second, when we are representing this demand and the determinants of demand in graphical form, we call it as demand curve. Generally, we define it as other things remaining same. Demand curve is a relationship between price and quantity of a particular commodity that the consumers are willing to buy. Now here the demand curve is downward sloping. In this graph, on the vertical axis, we have taken the price of the commodity. On the horizontal axis, quantity demanded by the consumer. Point A represents the quantity, the price and the quantity demanded by a consumer. At this point, price of the commodity is PA, and at these prices, consumers are willing to purchase QA amount of quantity. And when the prices are declining, when it is coming from PA to PB, the quantity demanded will increase. So, this is the relationship between quantity demanded and price. Apart from prices, there are other various determinants which affect the demand of the consumers. Their first is price of the commodity, which directly affects the demand of the consumer. For normal goods, there is a directly and inverse relationship between price and commodity demanded. When the price of the good is increasing, quantity demanded will decline. When the price of the commodity is declining, quantity demanded will increase. Second, income of the consumer. There is a direct relationship between income of the consumer and the quantity demanded. When the income of the consumer is increasing, the demand for the good will increase, mainly in case of normal goods. But in case of inferior goods means bad quality goods. So, whenever the price of the quality goods, bad quality goods are increasing, and the income of the consumer is increasing, the consumer will shift towards the superior goods. They will avoid inferior goods. Price of related goods. There are mainly two types of goods: substitute goods and complementary goods. Substitute goods, when the price of one good is increasing, the consumer can shift towards the other goods. Like for example, tea and coffee. When the price of tea is increasing, the consumers will shift towards the coffee and they will demand more quantity of coffee. These are known as substitute goods. Second, complementary goods. The complementary goods are those goods which we can use which we should use in joint. Like for example, pen and ink. Ink pen and ink, they are the complementary goods, because without ink we cannot use the pen, and without pen there is no use of ink. So, whenever the price of one substitute good is increasing, the demand for other good will increase. For example, when the price of tea is increasing, demand for coffee will increase. So we can say that there is a positive relationship between price and quantity demanded. On the other hand, in case of complementary goods, when the price of pen is increasing, the demand for ink will also decline. There is a negative relationship between price and quantity demanded in case of complementary goods. Fourth, the expected price and income of the goods in future periods. When the consumers are expecting that in the future the price of a particular good is going to decline, they will postpone their current consumption for the future, and their demand in the current today's date, it will decline. On the contrary, when they are expecting that in the future the price of the commodity will increase, their demand in today's price will increase. Likewise, expectation about the future income. When the consumers are expecting that in the future their income is going to increase, they will postpone their consumption today and they will demand for more goods in the future. Likewise, taste of the consumers. Taste and preferences also affect the demand of the consumers, because taste, preferences, fashion, trend also changes according to the time. For example, nowadays there is more demand for new music channels, Netflix, Hotstar, because there is more trend among the young generation. So for that, demand for these channels are also increasing. Number of buyers and number of usages. When the number of buyers and number of usages are more, demand will increase. For example, milk. Milk has many uses. Milk is not only used for tea or coffee, but it has use for children, for old people, for making other dishes. So when the demand and when the usages are more, demand for the product will also increase. So these are the determinants of demand which affects the quantity demanded of the consumer. Now, movement along the demand curve and shift in the demand curve. When there is a change in the price of the commodity, the quantity demanded will increase. Now, when the price of the commodity, suppose it is P1, and at prices P1 the quantity demanded is OQ1. Now, due to some reasons, when the price of the commodity is increasing from OP1 to OP2, the demand for the product will decline from OQ1 to OQ2. This shows the movement along the demand curve. In this case, there is a contraction in the demand. On the contrary, when the price is declining from OP2 to OP1, the demand is increasing from OQ2 to OQ1. This is known as expansion in the demand. This occurs only in the price of the commodity itself. This we call movement along the demand curve. Next is shift in the demand curve. When there is a change in the demand curve due to the other factors, or we can say due to the other determinants of the demand, like prices of the related goods, income of the consumer, taste and preferences of the consumer, usages of the product, your demand curve will shift towards the right side. For example, when the income of the consumer has increased, the demand curve will shift towards the right side, and the consumer at the given prices, the consumer will demand for more goods. So here other things remaining constant. Here we are assuming that the price of the goods, price of the related goods, taste and preferences are constant, and only income is changing, and due to the change in income, your demand is changing. Likewise, if there is a change in taste and preferences of the consumer. Now here income of the consumer, prices of the related goods, price of the goods will remain constant, and when the taste and preferences are changing, or it is increasing, the demand for the good will increase. On the contrary, if the income of the consumer is declining or the taste and preferences are changing in a negative sense, then your demand curve will shift towards the left side. So whenever demand is increasing, demand curve will shift towards the right side, and when the demand there is a reduction in demand, demand curve will shift towards the left side. And it only happens when there is a change in the determinants of the demand curve other than your prices of the goods. And when there is a shift in the demand curve, we keep the other things constant. Now, law of demand. On the basis of relationship between prices and quantity demanded, we have established, or the economists have established, law of demand, which says that there is a negative relationship between prices and the quantity of the commodity or the quantity demanded. This inverse relationship shows that the demand curve is downward sloping. In this case, demand is your dependent variable and price is independent variable. Demand is dependent variable because it depends upon the price of the commodity. Now, here the exceptions are there. Exceptions to the law of demand. There are mainly two exceptions, given goods and status symbol goods. Given goods are non-luxury goods, or we can say necessary goods, the goods which are used for basic needs. For example, rice, salt, wheat. These are known as given goods. When the prices of these goods are increasing, demand for these goods will also increase. In this case, the demand curve is upward sloping. Other factor, that is your status symbol good. Status symbol good arises when there is a demonstration effect in the society. When people wants to show their status. In this situation, as the price of the goods are increasing, demand for those goods will also increase. For example, car, diamonds, gold, apartments, these are the status symbol good. People want to show their status. So, whenever the prices of these goods are increasing, people will demand for more goods. So, these are the two exceptions of the law of demand. Now, why demand curve is downward sloping? We know that there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, and that is why our demand curve is downward sloping. But there are mainly three reasons. Because of that, our demand curve is downward sloping. First is law of diminishing marginal utility. As per law of diminishing marginal utility, according to Marshall, as we consume more and more units of good, the utility declines, or as we consume more and more unit of goods, the utility declines, and here in the law of diminishing marginal utility, we measure the utility in terms of money. So, that is why our demand curve is downward sloping. Second is income effect. Suppose, for example, your mother has given you 100 rupees to purchase some stationery items, and you have assumed that the price of notebook is 50 rupees and the price of pen is 20 rupees and the price of eraser is 30 rupees. So, with that 100 rupees you will fulfill your demand. But when you reach to the shop, you found that the price of the notebook is 25 rupees, the price of pen is 25 rupees and the pencil is only of, the price of eraser is only 10 rupees. So, it is only 60 rupees. So, you have purchased all the things within your 60 rupees. Now, 40 rupees left with you. This is nothing but your real income. Now, with this 40 rupees, you will demand for other things also, right? So, this is called income effect. Income effect generates when there is a reduction in the prices of commodities. When the price of commodities are declining, the real income of the consumer increases, and when due to increase in the real income of the consumer, they will demand for more goods. This is called income effect. So, that is why your demand curve is downward sloping. Other reason is substitution effect. When the price of one commodity is increasing, the consumers will demand for other good whose price is less. They will shift towards the cheaper good than the very expensive goods. So, this substitution is, due to this substitution, our demand curve is downward sloping, and this is called substitution effect. So, due to these three reasons, the law of diminishing marginal utility, the income effect and substitution effect, our demand curve is downward sloping. Now, we can measure demand in various forms. One is graphical form, in which we are representing the prices on the vertical axis and quantity demanded on the horizontal axis, and our demand curve is downward sloping. Other than graphical representation, we can also represent our demand in a functional form. Demand is a function of price and it can be expressed as follows. Demand is equals to function F is a function of price. P here represents price. Instead of price, we can also write income of the consumer. taste and preferences of the consumer, and the prices of the related goods. Now, the third measure to represent the demand or how to measure the demand is demand schedule. Demand schedule is nothing but it refers a tabular representation of the relationship between price and quantity demanded. In this, we demonstrate a quantity of a product demanded by an individual at a given prices. So, there are mainly two types of demand schedules, individual demand and market demand schedule. For example, in a village, there is a farmer and at price rupees 10, the quantity demanded by him is 15 kg per week. Likewise, at rupees 15, his demand is rupees 10, and at rupees 20, the demand is 8 kg. So, demand is declining according to the law of demand. As prices are increasing, demand is declining. But this table shows individual farmers' demand schedule. But in village, there are not only one villager, not only one farmer, there are many farmers. So, when we are combining these demands of all the farmers, we get market demand schedule. So, likewise, in economy, when there is a demand for a particular good, it is not coming from the individual person. It is coming from the whole economy or from the whole market, in which there are many individual or many consumers are there. When we are aggregating this demand, we get market demand schedule. In this, to get the market demand schedule, we are adding the individual demands of each consumer. Like for example, in this table, price of commodity is given. Now here we assume that the price of the commodity remains constant. It is not changing according to the demand. Now the individual demand from X person, Y person, Z person, likewise we have number of consumers. So we will add, suppose the demand from consumer X is 1, the demand from consumer Y is 3, the demand for consumer Z is 4, at price is 4. So the joint demand or the market demand at price 4 will be 8. This is known as market demand schedule. When we are representing the market, when we are representing the prices and quantity demanded in tabular form, we get market demand schedule. Now, demand or the theory of demand only shows the relationship between price and the other determinants of the demand and the quantity demanded. But it does not tell us how much quantity demanded is changing when there is a change in the price of the commodity or when there is a change in the other determinants of the quantity demanded. So, for that we refer elasticity of demand. Elasticity of demand refers to the responsiveness of quantity demanded of a good to a change in its price, income or the price of the related goods. So, elasticity is nothing but it is a sensitiveness or responsiveness of quantity demanded towards the change in prices or other determinants of the quantity demanded. There are various kinds of elasticity. Perfectly elastic demand. Perfectly elastic demand means when there is a small change in price brings a big change or huge change in quantity demanded. For example, 1% change in price is bringing 90% change in quantity demanded or 100% change in quantity demanded. This is known as perfectly elastic demand. And in this case, our demand curve is horizontally straight line and the value of perfectly elastic demand is infinity. Second, perfectly inelastic demand. In this case, a small change in the price or a bigger change in price will not bring any change in our quantity demanded. The quantity demanded will remain constant, whatever is the prices. It means our quantity demanded is not at all sensitive towards the change in prices. In this situation, the demand curve is vertically straight line and the value of elasticity of demand is equal to 0. Now, these two things are very unrealistic situation. In real world, we don't find these type of conditions. Third is relatively elastic demand, which says that our demand is very much sensitive towards the change in prices. For example, 5% change in prices is bringing 10% or 20% changes in quantity demanded. So, this is called relatively elastic demand. In this situation, our demand curve is flat. Second, relatively inelastic demand, which says that our demand is less responsive towards the change in prices of the commodity. In this situation, our demand curve is steep shaped. Unitary elastic, which says that proportionate change in prices and proportionate change in quantity demanded is same. So, this is called unitary elastic demand. So, here the value of elasticity is equals to 1, which says that proportionate change in demand and proportionate change in price of the commodity are same. And the relatively elastic demand, the value is greater than 1, and in case of inelastic demand, relatively inelastic demand, elasticity value varies from 0 to 1. Now, there are 4 types of elasticity of demand. Price elasticity of demand, which says that proportionate change in prices or the proportionate change in quantity demanded due to the change in prices. And income elasticity of demand refers to the change in quantity demanded due to the change in prices. Cross price elasticity of demand measures the change in the proportionate change in the quantity demanded due to the change in the prices of related goods. Promotional elasticity of demand measures the change in the quantity demanded due to the change in the expenditure on the advertisements. So, these are the different types of price elasticities of demand, and there are various methods through which we measure the elasticity of demand, like point method, arc elasticity of method, slope method, and total revenue method. So, in today's session, we have discussed about definition of demand, types of demand, law of demand, movement in the demand curve, and elasticity of demand, determinants of demand, and what are the different measures to elasticity of demand. So, in the next session, we will discuss about demand forecasting and e-commerce, and what is supply and how supply and demand are related, and how we can establish the equilibrium in the market. Thank you so much for today's session. Thank you.